If you have followed the saga of the Oakland A's, then you may be aware of the so-called flip tax being imposed on Athletics owner John Fisher should he decide to dump the team between 2028 and 2034. Some out there have claimed that this is a veiled vote of no confidence from MLB owners, or it's an added level of protection for them. However, as West Coast rap legend Daz Dillinger once said,
Hold up, wait a minute, all my thugs get gangsta with it.
Hold up, wait a minute, indeed. The Oakland A's flip tax is utterly pointless. Anyone trying to tell you otherwise simply doesn't know what they're talking about. John Fisher was never, ever in 1,000,001 years going to sell the franchise before it began play in a new Las Vegas stadium. That was not part of the plan. It doesn't make any sense for him to, and it flies in the face of baseball history when it comes to new stadiums. If you're not familiar with the flip tax provision, it was reported on by Bob Nightengale of the USA Today. It essentially states that the A's relocation agreement includes a caveat that states Fisher would need to pay a tax should he offload the team between 2028 and 2034. This tax starts at 20% in that first year while progressively getting smaller annually. Additionally, it's being reported that Fisher may not sell the team between now and 2027. This move by Manfred and MLB owners, it's good for Fisher. Hell, he probably requested it. Not only does Fisher now have a reason to aggressively ignore any calls for him to sell the team, Manfred won't let me, LOL, but this so-called flip tax allows the Gap heir to now follow a well-traveled, a well-worn path among former Major League Baseball owners of stadium build and dumps. Don't take my word for it. The proof is in the pudding, and in this case, the pudding is recent Major League Baseball history. Let's start with those Marlins of Miami. We've already covered the disaster their new stadium has been, and if you'd like to know more about that, you can watch the video in the upper right-hand corner of your screen there. Anyway, the Marlins began play in a new ballpark in 2012. This was after a long line of cajoling by scumbag Jeffrey Loria, who had basically done anything and everything in his power to get enough public financing for this facility to be built. You think with all of that time and other resources invested into this project, he, like Fisher has said, would be in it for the long haul. So yeah, about that. Loria was not in it for the long haul at all. In fact, he would offload the franchise some 5 years later in 2017, raking in a hefty profit for himself in the process. Loria's goal from day one is patently obvious. Buy an MLB franchise, get a stadium built, sit on it for a few years, and then flip it. I mean, I guess in that regard, mission accomplished, but yeah, screw Jeffrey Loria. The next example of this hasn't happened yet, but we are well down the path of stadium build and dump. That brings us to the Atlanta Braves. In 2017, the Braves began play in their brand new Cobb County ballpark, what it today is known as Truist Park. This is part of a much larger real estate development built by Liberty Media, the ball club's owner, called The Battery. This year saw all of those assets, the team, the stadium, the real estate developments, all placed in a single entity, a publicly traded company. This was done with two clear goals in mind for Liberty Media. The first goal for the ownership group was to gain access to some pretty hefty tax breaks. You know, I suppose all of that public money Liberty Media accepted, it just wasn't enough to cover everything, and they need these tax breaks after all. I mean, what's good as being a billionaire if you can't get tax breaks and not pay your taxes? While annoying, that is not what's important for this story. The second goal is what we're focused on here, and that is the reality. A publicly traded company with these assets makes it much easier for Liberty Media to sell the team down the road. In fact, it's been reported in several places that it's a matter of when and not if the Braves are sold. Some even saying that a sale of the Atlanta Braves could come as soon as next season, which would be 6 years after Truist Park first opened. So Marlins sold after 5 years, Braves potentially sold after 6 years of a new stadium opening. Next up is a speed round featuring a pair of National League Central Division teams. We start with the Pittsburgh Pirates, who opened their sparkling new downtown stadium, PNC Park, in 2001. A few years later, minority owner Bob Nutting, well, his family in this case, would purchase a controlling interest in the franchise. There were a few other issues at play here for the Pirates, but in reality, the sale doesn't happen had the team not had a new ballpark in place and open for a couple of seasons. We actually don't even know when the sale took place because it was all done behind the scenes. Meanwhile, their rivals in Cincinnati saw a similar episode play out over Great American Ballpark, which opened in 2003. At the start of 2006, and with a new stadium in operation for a couple of seasons, then Reds owner Carl Lindner decided he had had enough and sold his team. Who started all of this? Probably Bud Selig. I mean, really, seriously, who else could it be?
Look who it is.
It could only be you.
He knew all along.
Despite having served as acting commissioner of baseball since 1992, the Selig family was never forced to give up its stake in the Milwaukee Brewers. Selig always maintained he had handed control of the team over to his daughter, but no one believed that for a second. It was basically widely assumed by everyone in baseball Selig still owned and ran the Brewers, and his daughter was just a figurehead. Anyway, work on a new baseball stadium in Milwaukee began in the 1990s, with what was then known as Miller Park opening in 2001. And what do you know? Surprise, surprise. Are you ready for this? Selig's family decided to sell the Brewers in 2004, 3 years after that completion of a brand new stadium. Look, they could have sold the team anytime from when he was named acting commissioner in 1992, from when Selig was named permanent commissioner in 1998, any moment between then and the stadium being completed, but they did not. The Selig family specifically waited for Miller Park to be completed, for it to begin operations for a few seasons, and then sold it in 2004. This is the important thing to note here. This, by the way, just a few of the notable examples. If you look around baseball at all of the cities and all of the teams who have gotten new stadiums in the past 25 years, it happens basically everywhere. I mean, San Diego Padres, New York Mets, Philadelphia Phillies, all those franchises were sold in about 10 or so years after beginning play in their new stadium. Look, I know there were various reasons leading to each sale. It's not directly correlated to the new stadium being open, but you can't deny that there is some connection there. Like, these sales don't happen without a new stadium being in place. To that extent, the Oakland Athletics flip tax, it's good for John Fisher. It's exactly what he wants based on the trend of past franchise sales. Really, it just places them in the sweet spot of selling an MLB franchise, which is roughly 5 to 10 years after a new stadium has opened. So what does MLB get out of this? Optics, I suppose. They can proudly proclaim they put guardrails in place for the fans and the cities to make sure Fisher couldn't dump the team before it was built, or whatever they want to say. I don't even know what they're going to claim. Thing is, though, history tells us those guardrails are they're fictitious. It's a mirage. No one was selling a team before the stadium was getting built. We have volumes and stacks of evidence that shows us owners don't sell before the stadium gets built. One thing I have seen floating around out there is the belief that this clause or this provision or this tax or whatever you want to call it will hinder Fisher's ability to gain financing for the new ballpark in Las Vegas. After all, he only has access to $380 million of public funding. The rest of the $1 billion or $1.5 billion or however much that stadium ends up costing is going to be his responsibility to at least finance in some way. The thing is, the Oakland A's flip tax does not prevent that in any way, shape, or form if you actually think about it. As Brody Brazil mentioned in his video on this topic, we have no idea if the flip tax provision covers minority ownership stakes in the Athletics. Nothing may stop Fisher from simply spinning off 10%, 15% of the franchise tomorrow and having more than enough money to cover construction costs on the new stadium. Even if any potential sale of a minority stake in the Athletics is taxed, that doesn't change the end game here. We all know what's going to happen. The process is so painfully transparent for anyone to see. John Fisher will end up selling the Athletics sometime in 2030, and at this point it seems most likely that the buyer will be the Fertitta family, one of Las Vegas' biggest power brokers. Nothing is stopping them from reaching some sort of handshake agreement right now that ensures the family will assist with stadium funding today, with an understanding their group can purchase the ball club when the Oakland Athletics flip tax expires in 2035. This has seemingly been the play from basically day one of this entire ordeal with the Oakland A's. Major League Baseball owners have used this playbook so often in the past 25 years that I'm betting the pages are worn off and that it just looks like a used middle school textbook at this point. Sure, absolutely, I will grant you that the financing and the planning and the relocation element of the A's plot here looks different from all of those other examples. It's a lot messier, for sure. There's no debating that this has been extremely messy, but it doesn't change the end goal one bit, one iota. Fisher's going to sell the team. The flip tax is not doing anything to deter that whatsoever. In Major League Baseball, you get a new stadium built and you sell the team about 5 to 10 years later. There have been some that have obviously done it in 2 or 3 years, but what really is apparent is that if you're a Major League Baseball owner, what you want to do is you want to get that new stadium built. You want to get it in operation for a few years so that way revenue is coming in. That is how you maximize value of the entire franchise, of the entire organization. All Major League Baseball has done with this flip tax is protected John Fisher, allowed him to make sure he can get the most possible money when he does sell a franchise in 2035 or 2036, or hell, maybe he even bites the bullet and pays the tax in 2034. I mean, who really knows, right? Whatever the case may be, this is not good news for the Oakland A's. This is good news for one man and one man only. That is John Fisher, who is now locked in to the classic stadium build and dump playbook. That does it for me. I am Cheyenne Hollis. This is the Touchback. I'd say hashtag sell the team, but Major League Baseball has now made it a binding agreement with Fisher that he can do no such thing. So I guess expansion for Oakland? I mean, who knows at this point? But as always, make sure you hashtag take it out to the 25.